She returned from combat a hero. Her husband threw her and her loyal German shepherd out into the rain. He was a desperate man, in debt to a ruthless loan shark, and he'd just told a predator exactly where to find her. Forced to flee, her truck died, stranding her in a remote mountain town. She thought she had escaped the danger. What she didn't know? She had just run straight into the heart of the enemy's territory. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe in second chances, hit subscribe. The San Diego air, usually a warm, salt-laced caress, felt thin and sharp. A late autumn chill had crept in from the Pacific, cloaking the sprawling suburbs in a damp, gray twilight. For Sergeant Anya Petrova, this cool air was a welcome shock after 9 months of breathing the baked dust of Kandahar. At 24, she carried the lean, coiled strength of a Force Recon Marine. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, disciplined bun, revealing a face with high cheekbones and a determined jaw. But it was her eyes, a startling clear gray, that told her story. They held the focus of a trained scout and a weariness that went far beyond her years. She wore her simple service uniform, the fabric crisp and practical. A second skin she felt more at home in than any civilian clothes. At her side, moving with the silent, fluid grace of a shadow, was Ranger. He was a magnificent 3-year-old German shepherd, his sable and black coat immaculate, his amber eyes missing nothing. He was not merely a pet, he was her partner, trained to a razor's edge, and his bond with Anya was absolute. As she pushed open the front door of the small house she'd dreamed of for 274 days, Ranger didn't bound inside. He pressed against her leg, a low, almost inaudible growl vibrating in his chest. The house was heavy, with a suffocating silence. Caleb stood in the middle of the living room, a ghost in their home. The easy smile and athletic build Anya remembered were gone, replaced by a gaunt frame and the haunted, darting eyes of a cornered animal. He was 26, but looked a decade older, dressed in stained sweatpants and a frayed t-shirt. The room around him was a mess of takeout containers and empty bottles. "The astrolabe," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "No hello, no hug." "You brought it back, right?" Anya froze, her hand resting on Ranger's tense neck. The astrolabe was a beautiful piece of brass craftsmanship she'd haggled for in a bustling market. A small piece of history to anchor her to a world outside of war. "It's here," she said slowly, reaching into her pack and pulling out the intricate disc-shaped device. It felt cold in her hand. "Caleb, what's going on?" The story tumbled out of him, a confession born of pure terror. He owed money, a staggering amount. He'd made a deal with a loan shark, a man named Silas, based in Denver. When the debt spiraled out of control, Caleb, in a desperate lie, had invented a story about his Marine wife returning from overseas with a priceless artifact. Now, Silas wanted to collect. "He thinks it's worth a fortune. He'll kill me, Anya." Caleb's eyes were fixed on the brass in her hand, his reason lost to panic. He lunged for it. Instinct, honed by countless hours of training, took over. Anya didn't strike. She moved. In a single fluid motion, she pivoted, using his own momentum to unbalance him. She secured his arm in a simple, painless control hold that forced him to his knees. It wasn't an act of aggression. It was the absolute assertion of control. He looked up at her, his face a mask of shock and fear, seeing not the woman he married, but a capable, dangerous stranger. What did you do to me?" he stammered. The fury in her chest was eclipsed by a wave of profound sorrow. "I came home, Caleb." Her control broke his. Fear became a wild, shrieking madness. He scrambled away from her, his eyes landing on her neatly packed sea bags by the door. "Get out!" he screamed, shoving her towards the entrance. He grabbed one of the heavy bags and hurled it onto the wet lawn. "Get out with your damn dog! If I can't have it, then you can deal with Silas yourself. He has eyes everywhere. That whole mountain range is his territory. There's nowhere for you to run." He threw the last of her belongings out into the encroaching night. The door slammed shut. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was a gunshot in the silent house, a final, definitive end. Anya stood on the cold concrete, the night air chilling her to the bone, not just a soldier without a home, but a target. Her first mission back on American soil had just been defined. Survive. Hundreds of miles away, in the snow-dusted mountains of Colorado, Liam Monroe sat in the dark of his room at the Timberline Lodge. The rain that was just a chill in San Diego was a furious, icy downpour here, lashing against the old glass of his window. At 28, he had the broad-shouldered build of the Army Ranger he once was, but a profound stillness had settled over him, the kind that comes from carrying too much weight for too long. His phone vibrated on the nightstand, the screen illuminating the name of his former platoon sergeant. He watched it buzz, his expression unchanging until the screen went dark again. The ambush that had claimed his entire squad had left him as its sole survivor, a ghost haunting his own life, a soldier still fighting a war no one else could see. For 2 days, Anya drove north, the manicured lawns of San Diego, dissolving into the raw, unforgiving spine of the Rocky Mountains. Her old pickup truck, a relic from her father, had been her escape pod, but the engine had been complaining for the last 100 miles. As she crossed into Colorado, the cold rain intensified, turning to thick, wet snow that clung to the pines. The truck gave a final, shuddering gasp and died at a frost-covered sign that read, "Welcome to Havenwood, population 482. Leaving a note on the dash, she and Ranger began their trek. The only sign of life was a distant flickering glow. It led them to the Timberline Lodge, a grand 2-story structure of dark timber and river stone that looked like it had been wrestled from the mountain itself. It was magnificent but weary, its broad shoulders slumped under the weight of time and neglect. The woman who opened the heavy oak door was the heart of the lodge made manifest. Eleanor Ellie Monroe was in her late 60s, tall and sturdy, with a braid of silver hair hanging down her back. Her face was a roadmap of smiles and worries, and her blue eyes held a sharp, assessing intelligence that missed nothing. She wore a thick wool sweater over a flannel shirt, her hands dusted with flour. She'd lost her husband years ago to the mountain's unpredictable moods and had run the lodge alone ever since, her spirit as resilient and weathered as the surrounding peaks. She took in Anya's drenched uniform, the exhaustion etched onto her face, and the unwavering vigil of the dog at her side. "Looks like the mountain claimed another engine," Ellie said, her voice raspy with a hint of warmth. "Get in before you two become statues." Inside, the lodge smelled of wood smoke, pine, and baking bread. Anya explained her situation, omitting the ugly details. Ellie listened, nodding slowly, her gaze never leaving Anya's face. "I can't offer charity," she said finally, her tone practical, not unkind. "But I have a leaky roof, a fence line that's more suggestion than barrier, and a furnace that sounds like a dying bear. You work, you stay. Ranger earns his keep by looking intimidating. Deal?" Relief, sharp and overwhelming, coursed through Anya. Deal. As Ellie showed her to a small, clean room, a figure melted back into the shadows of the upstairs hallway. Liam saw her before she saw him. From his vantage point, he noted her posture. Straight, economical, even in exhaustion. He saw how her eyes didn't just look. They scanned, cataloging the room's exits, the other guests, the structural layout. He saw the discipline in the way she moved. This wasn't a lost tourist. This was a soldier. The sight of her, so capable and so clearly in trouble, was the first stone tossed into the still, dark waters of his apathy. He didn't speak, but for the first time in months, he felt the instinct to observe sharpen into something more. A need to understand. The next morning, Anya went into Havenwood for supplies. The town was a ghost of what it might have been. For sale signs dotted the main street like lonely tombstones. At the general store, the only one still operating, she met the owner, Mr. Henderson. He was a man in his 70s with kind, tired eyes and shoulders permanently stooped from a lifetime of lifting the town's burdens. He was bagging her meager groceries when he looked out the window, his expression darkening. "Another one's thinking of selling," he sighed, nodding towards a passing pickup truck. "The Miller family. Corbin paid them a visit last week." He lowered his voice. "He's the face of that new investment firm. Comes in, makes a lowball offer. If you refuse, things start to happen. The Miller's hay barn caught fire a few nights ago. Faulty wiring, the sheriff said. But we all know." He looked at Anya, his gaze heavy with a generation of unspoken fears. "This town is dying, Sergeant, and Corbin is the vulture circling overhead. Anya's blood ran cold. That whole mountain range is his territory. Caleb's terrified warning echoed in her ears. Corbin wasn't just a corporate bully. He was the local enforcer for a much larger predator. She hadn't escaped the threat. She had just walked straight into its nest. Anya's presence was a quiet catalyst at the lodge. Her days were spent in purposeful labor, mending fences and patching the roof with a methodical efficiency that Liam began to mirror. They worked together in a comfortable silence, two soldiers who understood that shared tasks were a language of their own. The ghost in Liam's eyes began to recede, replaced by the focused gaze of a man with a mission. He saw how she reinforced a loose window frame, not just for warmth, but for security. He understood. Their fragile peace was shattered just before the storm hit. Sheriff Thompson's cruiser crunched up the gravel driveway. He was a man in his late 50s, his uniform straining slightly at the waist, but his shoulders were broad and his face, though deeply lined with worry, was honest. He was the law in Havenwood, but he was outgunned and he knew it. "Just checking in, Ellie," he said, his gaze lingering on Anya. "Corbin's been quiet, and that's what worries me." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "His lawyers are airtight. He's a shark that knows how to bleed this town without leaving a drop of illegal blood in the water. My hands are tied until he makes a real mistake." His words confirmed their isolation more than any wall of snow could. They were on their own. That night, the past screamed back into Anya's life. A burner phone, shoved into her pack by Caleb in his final, panicked moments, buzzed with a desperate vibration. She answered. Caleb's voice was a thin, terrified whisper. "He knows, Anya. Silas tracked your card from a gas station 2 days ago. He knows you're in the mountains. He told me. He said if I don't bring you and the astrolabe back, he'll start with my fingers." The line went dead. A cold dread settled in Anya's stomach. She immediately went to her truck, Ranger at her heels. A quick practice sweep of the undercarriage revealed it. A small, black magnetic box. A GPS tracker. It had been there for days. She brought it inside, placing it on the table before Liam. His face, illuminated by the lantern light, was a granite mask. The haunted veteran was gone, replaced by the Army Ranger. "He's been watching," Anya said, her voice low. "It's not just him," Liam replied, his own instincts flaring. He grabbed a heavy flashlight and headed for the basement. A few minutes later, he returned, his expression grim. "The main water pipe. It's been sawn through almost to the breaking point. One more hard freeze and this whole place would have flooded." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The tracker was Silas's move. Sophisticated, patient surveillance. The sabotage was Corbin's. Brutal, local intimidation. They weren't two separate threats. They were two pincers of the same claw, closing in on them. "Silas and Corbin," Anya breathed, the full weight of her situation crashing down. "They're the same operation. I didn't escape. I ran right, into the center of his web." As if summoned by their realization, the world outside dissolved into a roaring whiteness. The forecasted storm arrived not as a gradual snowfall, but as a sudden, violent blizzard. The wind shrieked like a predator, and the power grid surrendered with a final flicker. The Timberline Lodge was plunged into darkness, a lone, besieged island in a sea of blinding snow. They were trapped, cut off, and the enemy was coming. The headlights sliced through the swirling chaos of the blizzard, 2 pairs of them, crawling up the lodge's driveway like predatory eyes. An SUV and a pickup truck crunched to a halt. 3 figures emerged, dark silhouettes against the blinding white. The first was Corbin, a bear of a man whose size was a weapon in itself. The second was a wiry, twitchy man named Jax, his thin frame coiled with nervous energy. And the last, stumbling behind them, was Caleb, a pathetic figure swallowed by a parka too big for him, his face pale with terror. Inside, the Timberline Lodge was a fortress of shadows, lit only by the warm, dancing glow of a few strategically placed hurricane lamps. The battle had already been decided in the quiet moments before the enemy's arrival. Anya, Liam, and Ellie were not victims waiting for a slaughter. They were a fire team defending their home. Ellie, her face set with grim determination, stood guard at the back entrance, her late husband's 12-gauge shotgun held with steady hands. Liam had taken an observation post in the second-floor linen closet, which had a small, overlooked window with a commanding view of the front approach. Anya, armed with nothing but a heavy iron fire poker and her training, commanded the main floor. Ranger was a silent statue at her side, his body tensed, his ears tracking every crunch of snow outside. The front door didn't just open, it exploded inward, splintered by a heavy boot. Jax came in first, a crowbar held like a weapon, his eyes darting nervously into the gloom. "Corbin wants the woman and the dog," he yelled into the darkness. "And the brass thing, make it easy." This was Anya's arena. She had already coated the kitchen floor with a thin, nearly invisible layer of cooking oil. As Jack stepped through the swinging doors, his feet went out from under him. He flailed, crashing against a prep table. Before he could recover, Anya twisted the valve on an old steam pipe for the industrial dishwasher, filling the small room with a thick, scalding cloud of vapor. Blinded and disoriented, Jack swung his crowbar wildly. Anya moved through the steam like a phantom, circling behind him. The takedown was swift, silent, and brutally efficient. A perfectly applied chokehold that sent him slumping to the floor, unconscious. Upstairs, Corbin was using a more direct approach, kicking in doors one by one. But Liam had prepared for brute force. He had used the old dumbwaiter's rope and pulley system, anchoring it to a massive oak armoire in the hallway. As Corbin shouldered his way into the master bedroom, his boot snagged the tripwire Liam had stretched across the threshold. With a groan of tortured wood, the heavy armoire tipped and fell, pinning Corbin's legs beneath its immense weight, trapping him in the doorway. He roared in pain and fury, struggling to free himself. As he reached for a knife sheathed at his belt, Ellie appeared at the end of the hall, the shotgun leveled. But she didn't need to fire. Liam was already there, stepping out from an adjacent room. He wrenched the knife from Corbin's hand with cold, practiced ease. He looked at his mother, and in his eyes, she saw not the ghost who had haunted her house, but the son who had returned to defend it. He was home. The final confrontation took place in the great hall. Caleb stumbled in, his face a mess of tears and snow. He saw Anya standing by the hearth, Ranger growling low at her side. The firelight cast her in an intimidating silhouette. "Anya, please," he whimpered, falling to his knees. "Just give it to them." She looked down at him, not with hatred, but with a profound, weary pity. The pain was gone, replaced by a final, unshakable clarity. "It was never about the astrolabe, Caleb," she said, her voice steady and calm. "It was always about this. You on your knees because you were too weak to stand on your own." His terrified sobs were the only sound in the room. The fight was over. In the end, Anya's journey was not just about escaping a house or finding a new town. It was about discovering that even when the family you trust betrays you, God can place new people, new communities, and second chances in your path. What seemed like a devastating loss became a doorway. What felt like exile became true belonging. That is the quiet miracle of grace. It reminds us that when we walk through our coldest nights, He can still send light. It may come through the loyalty of an animal, the unexpected kindness of a stranger, or the simple warmth of a place that feels like home. In our own lives, we all carry burdens. We all know the sting of disappointment and the weight of betrayal. But if you hold on, if you keep faith even when the path is dark, you may find that God is already preparing a place for you, a place where you can be healed, where you are needed, and where you are loved again. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. And if you believe in miracles, if you believe no one should be left behind in the cold, subscribe to this channel for more stories of faith, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that guide us home. May God bless you and your family with warmth, protection, and peace.